And welcome everybody to the Geeking Poetic channel. I'm your host Larry Roberts. Over here to my right and your left is my co-host and none other than
Megan Guess.
And what is it we're here to do today?
We are here for another movie showdown.
Yes, it is Movie Showdown. It is a new series that we started recently, and if you didn't see the first episode of that, make sure you click on the link so you can go check that one out. Yeah, the theme that we chose for our first batch of Movie Showdowns has been Disney animated features, but not just any old Disney animated features. We're focusing on ones that we personally don't find to be like classics. These aren't, Lady and the Tramp or Alice in Wonderland or The Little Mermaid, or they don't want to trigger you with Little Mermaid.
Oh, yeah, please don't do that
She's
again.
got issues with Little Mermaid. But we are looking at the movies that are kind of maybe forgotten classics.
Yeah, forgotten gems.
We're going to put two of them up against each other. We're going to rank them in 5 different categories, and whichever movie wins the most categories wins that showdown. And then at the end of the season of Movie Showdown, I think we're going to do like the big brawl for all, right?
Yeah, there's only one can survive.
Yeah, so we're going to have all of the winners of each showdown go up against each other, and then we're going to rank them from the least to best. But what are the 2 movies we're going to do in this episode?
We are doing The Sword and the Stone.
Yes.
And it's going to go up against The Black Cauldron.
Yes. Now, spoiler alert, Sword in the Stone I had seen many, many years ago. Black Cauldron, honestly, folks, I'd never seen that whole movie.
Same.
Yeah, so I've only seen little bits and pieces of it on documentaries, and I've read plenty of articles about it, but we're really going into this pretty fresh, because had you ever seen Sword in the Stone before?
I have. It's been a long time.
Yeah, so it's still kind of fresh for us.
Yes.
But so what are the 5 categories that we're going to rank here?
So we do main character,
Yes,
supporting characters,
right.
villain.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta have a villain in
Yep.
Disney, right?
Absolutely.
We're gonna do best animation
Yes.
and overall story.
Yeah.
All right, Larry, why don't you introduce them to our first contender?
All right, here we go. First up is 1963's The Sword and the Stone. This fairly lighthearted take on the legend of King Arthur is based on the novel of the same name from 1938. We see a very young Arthur trying to earn the respect of his foster father, Sir Ector, and foster brother Kay, who is destined to be knighted and become a contender for the throne of England. Arthur attempts to become Kay's squire, but in the process runs into the magician Merlin. At this point, Merlin decides he's going to help the boy by teaching him a bunch of lessons about the world, by transforming Arthur into various animals in order to learn about science and physics, learning to swim and to fly like a bird, and basically just narrowly getting himself out of trouble in many instances. The movie focuses on the struggle Arthur has by being pulled between Merlin and his owl Archimedes, trying to show him a bigger world, while also trying to stay in the good graces of his foster family, who unfortunately continuously tend to put him down. After a run-in with a crazy old witch and some other mishaps and some disagreements with Merlin, we finally see Arthur meet his destiny when he comes upon the Sword and the Stone, which ultimately changes his life forever after. The movie's filled with classic Disney humor, and the animation is definitely rooted in that classic old Disney style. And it's really interesting that this movie just kind of falls through the cracks in so many ways, because a lot of the other movies from back then are considered such classics, but for some reason this one didn't catch on quite as much with people.
Yeah, you hear about all these kids and everybody going to Disney, and you have to pull the sword from the stone.
Oh yeah, they do have that.
Right? But it's such a big deal, so why is this movie not such a big deal?
I don't know. I just don't know. Yeah, because I thought overall it's a pretty cute movie, and there's a lot to like about it. So, I don't get it personally. Well, next up, the movie that has to go up against Sword in the Stone is this contentious one for a lot of people. And of course, we're talking about The Black Cauldron. Meg, do you want to get into this with them?
Yeah, let me try this one.
All right, let's see.
Next up is the animated feature The Black Cauldron. Released in 1985, it is loosely based on the books by writer Lloyd Alexander. It winds up showing influences ranging from old school British legends to Tolkien stories and beyond. The movie details how an evil being known as the Horned King is seeking out a legendary item known as the Black Cauldron, with which he will be able to create a vast army of cauldron-born undead soldiers that can help him conquer the world of man. A young boy named Taran is tasked with taking a special pig named Henwen to another location for safety due to the pig's psychic abilities that would enable the Horned King to find the cauldron should he get his hands on Henwen. It doesn't take long before Taran winds up losing the pig and being captured by the villain and his henchmen. But along the way, he befriends several companions, the Princess Elanwe, the minstrel Fluterflam, and a small creature named Gurgi, who Taran tends to treat like a pest, while Gurgi shows care and watchfulness over Taran. Taran and his crew meet witches and fairies on their quest to find this cauldron and destroy it before the Horned King can get his hands on it. And the movie is filled with some very tense and creepy animation, and a soundtrack that is epic and intense. In fact, the movie overall was so intense and unusual for the typical Disney animated fare that it would wind up getting a PG rating, and inevitably, it was a massive failure at the box office, barely making half of its budget back and almost bankrupting Disney's animation studios. But The Black Cauldron does have a dedicated fan base and has been a tale of its own kind of lore and legend over the years. Yeah, so I had heard about this movie for years, and I didn't really know much about it or know to check it out because it was so scary,
right,
and creepy sounding, and I just heard it was a huge failure, so I never got around to it.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't turned off by wanting to see it because it was scary. In fact, that actually really intrigued me. It came out in theaters, obviously, as you already said, it bombed, and then it wasn't available to rent or anything like that until like the late 90s.
Yeah, when that Disney Vault.
Right. Yeah, it took
no joke back then.
No, right. Yeah, it took a while for them to finally get around to putting this out, and then I just never got around to watching it. Let's get into the ranking. So our first category is best main character. While both characters are very similar and that they're both young boys and they're both kind of precocious and naive and getting themselves into situations that they shouldn't be getting themselves into.
As teen boys do.
Yeah, they do that. Arthur definitely, I think, comes across as having a little bit more of a humble attitude. He comes off as being a little bit more noble and down to earth with the way he looks at himself and the realities of what he thinks he's capable of doing. And Taran is like the complete opposite. He thinks he's going to be like the greatest thing, since sliced bread. And he's not happy with his lot in life, having to look after this pig all the time. Yep. And doesn't understand, how important of a job it is. And he's always daydreaming. And ultimately, like you mentioned in the description, his daydreaming is what ended up getting him and the pig captured in this movie. But for me, I think the best main character is Arthur.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with everything you just said. There's just something about Taran that irks the living crap out of me. When he gets that sword particularly, there's something wrong with him, mentally wrong. Because he is giggling the entire time. He's like mowing these people down left and right. It's like, what is wrong with this kid?
He's enjoying himself.
Yeah. Oh my God. He's so demented.
Well,
he's the next Horned King or something. Like, I don't know. I got to go with Arthur for this because good Lord.
At the end of both movies, while Sword in the Stone is only telling the beginning of Arthur's story, I mean, because there was a lot more to come, in his legend, but at least I feel like he went on a personal journey that ended with him being very heroic and noble and getting respect. Whereas Taran's story, I don't know. I kept expecting him to do something big and noble and heroic, and it just doesn't really happen.
His character grow it at all?
He did. I think he learned some lessons.
He learned how to be put in his place.
Well, that's true. But yeah, okay, so I'm going to guess that you're with me, huh?
I'm with you.
All right, so the winner of this first category for Best Main Character, we're giving it to Arthur. Next category, we have Best Supporting Cast. Now, I wasn't overly enthused with the supporting cast of either film. They were both just okay. For different reasons, though. When you're looking at the Black Cauldron, they almost could have had the winning cast for me because I really liked the princess. The minstrel Flan, he's funny and bumbly. He had some good parts in there. All the rest of them were okay, but the interesting thing is that they added all these characters to this story, and ultimately, they didn't really do very much. The minstrel was there purely for like comic relief. The princess ended up being there just to be like some sign of affection eventually for Taryn. The fairy folk that were there, whatever they were called, the fair folk or something they called them, they were fine, but they didn't really do all that much.
Took the pig back.
The witches obviously had a more important role to play, but even them, I don't know. I felt like they were just sort of doing the typical three witches thing that we've seen Disney and many other stories do over and over again. There wasn't anything particularly interesting going on there. But what makes it hard for me is that the character of Gurgi, I mean, truthfully, he's the hero of this movie. Gurgi is the real standout character in the whole movie, maybe next to the villain, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, I really expected Taryn to have like the big hero comeuppance and all that.
Yeah.
But it was Gurgi of all things.
Yeah.
So he had the big story arc here.
Yeah, Gurgi was the one that basically had like the hero's journey of the movie. He started out just
coward.
Yeah, he started out kind of cowardly, and Taryn is only too quick to put him in his place because Taryn's kind of a jerk. But Gurgi really shows pretty quickly that he's actually a considerate and deep thinking character. And the sacrifice that he makes in the end, nobody else in this whole crew made that kind of sacrifice. Because how great Gurgi is, it makes me want to like give it to that movie, for this category. But I just can't because I'm so disappointed that they didn't do more with that cast. Whereas, at least with Sword in the Stone, no, I didn't really care so much for Hector and Kay. I thought they acted like jerks. I thought all the rest of the humans in this movie were kind of, not very likable. Other than Merlin. Merlin ended up being, a simple kind of childlike version of the legend of Merlin and everything. But I thought he worked perfectly in the context of this movie.
Yeah, and then you add Archimedes to it.
Yeah.
The owl, and he's always putting in his 2 cents. And of course, nobody wants to listen to him when they really should.
He's the wise old owl. You would think they would listen to the wise old owl, but they don't. Yeah. But that adds to the story. It makes it funnier and it makes it more interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like the supporting cast is quite as expansive and potentially as interesting as the Black Cauldron's extended cast could have been. But they just dropped the ball with Black Cauldron. So I don't know about you, but for me, I'm going to give the supporting cast one to Sword in the Stone.
Yeah, they set it all up and then just did nothing with these characters.
No.
And there's so much potential there where, Merlin and Archimedes, love them. And like all the other little animals, the fish and the squirrel, and stuff like that. I think it's cute. I love them. That I don't want that movie without them.
Right.
Where I could take away any one of the Black Cauldrons and be like, whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't really miss them because they didn't amount to anything in the end.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad that it's that way. I'm sure there's people that are going to be really angry with us because I know there's people that love the Black Cauldron, but yeah, there was just a lot of missed potential with this cast, and I really wish they would have done more with it.
Yeah, individual people, I think they're great. Put together as a supporting cast, don't love it.
Yeah.
So, I'm with you.
All right, so the best supporting cast, Mark is going to go to The Sword in the Stone again. All right, now we're moving on to one of the best categories because it's always a lot of fun to debate about. We are talking about the best villain. Meg, do you want to go first on this one?
All right, yeah. So we got Miss Madam Mim.
Yeah.
For Sword in the Stone. She's a little crazy old lady.
A little bit.
A little crazy bat lady.
Yeah, she's a little
dragon lady, I guess.
Yeah, off her rocker.
Yeah. So you never know what she's going to turn into and literally what's up her sleeve.
Right.
They're evenly matched to go up against each other, so she makes a great nemesis for Merlin.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love her. She's a fun character.
She is.
But then you got the freaking Horned King, and that dude's off his rocker too. Like,
yeah.
way off his rocker. He's scary, like legit scary.
Yeah.
So it's so hard to compare the two of them, the Horned King and Madame Mim, because they're so drastically different.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you put apples and oranges against each other? And I gotta give it to the Horned King, because even as an adult, that dude's scary.
Yeah.
Like legit scary. So Horned King gets my vote.
Madam Mim, for that kind of movie, for Sword in the Stone, I think she's perfect. You don't want anything that's overly dark because that would not work with the rest of the movie. Right. I really think they came up with a great villain when they created the Horned King. Now, they did kind of do him dirty in the end because I expected him to have some great, super like climactic battle at the end, maybe between he and Taryn or something.
Or all of them together.
Or all of them. Yeah, it didn't really work out that way. He basically got defeated, I guess, by the cauldron and wind pressure. Although when he did die, it was pretty gruesome, like the way they animated it.
Yeah.
But man, I'm with you. I got to give it to the Horned King. That is just a really cool character, even if he is in an imperfect movie. Yeah, I think it's pretty cut and dry here. It's got to go to the Horned King. All right. Fourth category here, we have best animation effects. Yeah, okay. Again, this is a little bit tough too because these two are quite different from one another in terms of the way they look and the way they feel and the overall vibe. I mean, Sword in the Stone is just classic Disney animation. It's like the animation you would have seen in things like Alice in Wonderland or any of those ones from back around the 50s or the early 60s. I love that stuff. I'm a huge fan of classic Disney animation. And so watching this with fresh eyes, because I hadn't seen it since I was a little bitty kid, it brought back a great sense of nostalgia for me. When it gets to the Black Cauldron, though, the interesting thing for me about that is when we were watching it, the first thing that struck me is I was like, wow, this is really different. Like you could say the same thing was true when we were talking about The Great Mouse Detective. Mm-hmm. You know, it's those 80s Disney movies, the animated ones that had their own kind of vibe and feel to them. But at the same time, they did do some things that pulled it back into Disney realm. Like I thought that the princess definitely reminded me of a classic Disney princess in the way that she looked. Flam totally had kind of like an Ichabod Crane kind of quality to him, you know? So there was still things that were tying it in with Disney in so many respects, but then adding something new. I do almost equally love and respect both movies for their animation effects, but man, again, it's the scenes with the Horned King and the Cauldron and the smoke and the Cauldron-born, the undead as they're pouring out across the land. Yeah, just by a little bit, for me, I don't know about you, I'm giving this one to the Black Cauldron.
I agree with almost everything that you said.
Okay.
Everything you said. The Sword in the Stone, my favorite part of that is that rickety old tower that he's put into, Merlin's put in on Archimedes, where it's kind of swaying in the wind and popping up the umbrellas through it. That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Cracks me up every time. And I like the way that's animated. I like the classic Disney, like you're saying. And then we got the Black Cauldron. And when Taryn is climbing the side of the castle, it reminded me so much of He-Man.
Okay, right.
With the colors and all that. It was very, very distinct to that.
Right. Okay.
And same with you, the Horn King and the undead and it was creepy. The way they just kind of collapsed and died, and the way they were limp in his arms.
Yeah.
It was stunning animation.
Yeah.
So I hate to say this, but I agree with you, and I have to give it to the Black Cauldron.
Oh, wow. I thought for sure you were going to go Sword in the Stone. I thought for sure.
It's so gorgeous. There's nothing like that animation. It's so unique.
Yeah.
Even compared to the other ones, I think it's timeless, really.
Yeah.
And it's so well done.
Yep.
And
I agree. Yeah. Obviously.
I mean, I have to give it to Black
All
Cauldron.
right.
I have to.
Okay, so not only are you and I in agreement on all 4 categories so far, but we have a tie. So that means the first 2 categories are going to Sword in the Stone, and then the last 2 here went to the Black Cauldron. So it's going to come down to this last category to see who wins this round of Movie Showdown. All right, so we have this one last category, and it is Best Overall Story. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to go
for it.
Take it. I'm sorry if this is going out of turn here, but I'm just going to cut to the quick here. I am going to give this to The Sword in the Stone, because let me just talk about my issues with the Black Cauldron, okay? So I hadn't seen this movie. Like I said, I'd read about it. I'd heard about it for years. It had its own lore and legend to it. And all I had seen were like some little clips and some pictures. And I just had such high hopes for this movie after all these years. And I thought that it was going to be so dark and disturbing, and it was going to be totally deserving of this legendary status for why it had been essentially canceled by a lot of people, and it just didn't take off because it wasn't a family movie. And while it isn't a family movie, and it definitely does have some dark elements to it, I have to say that in terms of the story itself, this movie was such a freaking letdown. I mean, first of all, I've read up on it, and I know that it was taken from the Lloyd Alexander books. And from what I can ascertain, it does not follow the books pretty much at all. It takes like a lot of liberties. It's basically just taking some of the general concepts, and then they created their whole new own story for this Disney movie. That would be fine if the story that Disney came up with was better and more complete, but it's not. Again, it's just going into everything we said earlier. Taran, you set him up like he's going to be this hero, and he's totally not. Even by the end, you know, he's just like, well, I guess I'm never going to be a hero. Oh, well, time.
Pig watcher.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the farm. And you have all these other supporting characters. You think they're going to amount to something, and they don't. The princess, she's got that little magical bauble. Does it end up doing anything? Nope. You've got Flam and his magical harp. You realize he's got something magic as well. Does it wind up doing anything? Nope. You've got the fairy folk who, at least they do harbor the pig for a little while and take care of her to make sure she's safe until the team gets there. And then they're basically just like, okay, we're going to send the pig home now. And it's like, wait,
what?
Wait, what?
That's the whole point of the journey.
That's the whole thing?
Your one task was to take care of this goddamn pig.
Exactly. This pig, talk about a MacGuffin. We should have had that in our MacGuffin episode, because like the pig didn't ultimately even end up being the one to lead them to the Black Cauldron, which I thought was the whole point of the pig. There was so many things that they threw out there, and I was like, oh, this could be cool. Nope. This might be cool. Nope. Maybe this character is going to be, nope. And then I thought, you introduced that sword, that magical sword, and I thought for sure at the very end of the movie that the witches would step in and they would be like, Taran, you've proved yourself worthy. You need the sword to defeat the Horn King once and for all, and there'd be at least some kind of battle or final brawl for all there, and it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I didn't understand. And like I said, the only one who had an interesting story arc at all was poor little Gurgi.
I didn't see that coming at all.
No, and I didn't see that coming either, and I'm cool with it. I liked Gurgi. I like that they did that, but I didn't understand what the point of most of this movie was. There ended up being no point to most of these characters and their individual story arcs. It didn't really go anywhere. And how does the movie end? How does the movie end? It ends with Henwin the pig and the old guy on the farm and the one cranky little fairy sprite looking at the team walking home, looking in the well or whatever, and being like, well, yeah, that's the end of that. And then it literally ends with, yep.
Yep.
And I was like,
his face at the end, he's like, wait, what?
I'm like, okay, I mean, understand at the beginning of this movie, they had John Huston, they had the legendary John Huston do this great prologue. Very Tolkien Lord of the Rings style. He does this epic prologue where he's explaining the beginning of the story of the Witch King and his purpose and why he's after the cauldron and how he got to be the way he was, and it sets up this whole thing and you're like, wow, that sounds super epic. And then we don't really get anywhere near enough of that. And then at the end of the movie, I'm expecting maybe some kind of epilogue like that would be deserving of that great prologue. But I guess they just couldn't afford John Huston to do both. They just paid him to do the first one. And at the end, all we get is that little fairy sprite guy going, yup.
Yep.
It was like the ultimate smack in the face. I cannot forgive this movie for that. But
did we miss something? What did
I don't know, but all I know is that it was such a letdown. This story, The Black Cauldron, had so much potential to be just an outstanding story and an outstanding movie. The animation is great. You created cool enough characters to be in it. You certainly created one of the greatest villains of all time. And it was all right there. And just somehow, some way, they dropped the ball completely. It's not a completely unenjoyable movie. If it was on again in the future, would I possibly sit and watch it again? Yeah, I would consider watching it again. I really would have liked to have given it to The Black Cauldron. I can't. Sword in the Stone, it's not an absolutely perfect classic Disney movie, but it is far more enjoyable, and the overall story has a proper beginning and end, and it has a hero's journey from the beginning to end. I overall enjoyed what they did with most of the characters, even the ones I didn't like so much. I could appreciate what they did. Even in the end, they had Sir Ector and Sir Kay kind of have a little bit of a comeuppance and a come around and show their respect to Arthur, who was now going to be their king.
Yep.
That was, it just felt more complete. Black Cauldron, man, what a mistake. Please tell me you agree with me.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Okay.
As I was like, let me just sit back and let him do his rants, because the other night when we watched this thing, the more he talked about it, the more pissed off he got.
Oh my God. I was just...
like, I'm getting madder. It was so funny. I'm like,
was so disappointing.
Do your thing, because
oh my gosh.
It nailed everything. And yeah, I just wanted to see Taran grow up on this journey, and this pig help him grow up with all these visions and everything. I thought they'd do more with the visions, and in the end, like all these magical powers, the bauble and the harp and pig and the sword, all this stuff, they'd have to come together to beat this big badass king, Horned King.
It didn't mean anything. It didn't mean anything at all.
Like, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, the winner of this movie showdown is 1963's The Sword in the Stone, and it will now move on to be a contender against the winner of each other movie showdown episode until the final battle in the end to see how they rank at the end. And we really hope that we see all of you there. We hope you stick with us, and please please subscribe, hit that bell so that you know when the next episode is out. Here on the Geeking Poetic channel, we cover everything from music history to movies, cartoons, pop culture stuff. We cover all kinds of things that basically old geeks like us just get excited about. So if you like that stuff too, make sure you come back. And yeah, we'll be back before you know it with the next movie showdown. And we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it won't be quite as aggravating as this one was for me. Oy. So anyway, we'll see y'all soon, everybody. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Yep.
Nope.